Welcome to the Alignment Show, featuring conversations with folks who have taken steps to identify their highest values and align their lives around them. Time on this earth is not unlimited, and you may be seeking to make sure you spend your time on things that matter to you. These conversations will encourage you and support you in doing so. Now, let's meet this week's guest on the Alignment Show. And a good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it might be in your part of the world. Right now, you are on with the Alignment Show, and we're happy to have you here. My name is Don King. I am your host for this show, where we talk with people about living their values so they can value their life. And we have a great guest today, as we always do, but this is a fascinating conversation that we're going to have with Angelique Liles. I will introduce her in just a moment. First of all, I want to tell you a couple of things. For regular listeners, you're used to hearing this, but if you're on here for the first time, I want to let you know that Medium Well, the second book in the Sparklight Chronicles, is out. It's a business parable about Sky Jackson and Hope Roberts and Sky's journey to believing in herself. I think that will help you to believe in yourself. And so we've got a QR code up there on the screen. For those of you who are listening only, audio only, then you can find out about it by going to donking.com. That's Don with a double N, DONNKING.com/medium well. As a matter of fact, you can also find out about any of my books by going to books2read.com/donking. That will take you to any number of outlets. And also, we are pleased. It has occurred to me that since we have so many of our guests that come from the Go Giver Success Alliance, well, I would consider them to be a sponsor of this show, the Go Giver Success Alliance. It's a membership group that is just a fantastic community of support and resources. So you should go check them out. You can find out about them at the GoGiverSuccessAlliance.com. I think I've got a down here on the screen for those of you who can see it, GoGiverSuccessAlliance.com. You really ought to go check them out. Fantastic resource, as we said. In any case, what we have going on this week, got to get a couple of things off of my screen here. There we go. All right. So coming up this week, we have, it's a recorded conversation, but, we run it like it's live, and we're going to be right here with you to be able to look at chats and share those kind of things. So let's see if I can get my technology together here. Local video. Things have moved around here, folks. So give me just a second to get things lined up. There we are. And while I'm doing this, I will tell you about Angelique Liles. She is a member of that group that we were talking about, the Go Giver Success Alliance. Angelique, here we are. She is a team development and leadership coach. I wanted to get the term right here. She has a track record of developing high-performance teams. Her executive coaching practice is called Aspire Professional Development, and she specializes in team dynamics and leadership. Now, she has years of sales experience and sales management experience. That's not primarily what we're focusing on, of course. We're looking at what she has learned. We're looking at what brought her to that space. And so without missing anything else out, I'll have several comments here to share. Oh, let's go ahead and get some of them out. Kathy, thank you so much for being here with us this week. Appreciate the congratulations. Bob Berg, Bob and Kathy are the ones who are at the head of the Go Giver Success Alliance. and looking forward to meeting him well. And then, yes, this is going to be a great conversation. And so let's go ahead and bring up Angelique Liles. And thank you, Don. I appreciate that introduction for Angelique. Since at this point, as we're recording this, I don't quite know what you're going to say, but I'm sure it was very thorough. And so we're very glad to have this conversation with Angelique Liles. I'm pretty sure that one of the things I will have mentioned, Angelique, is how we have gotten to know each other, as so many of our guests, through Bob Berg's group, the Go Giver Success Alliance.
Yes.
And yeah, I've been so impressed in the conversations that you and I have had, and I thought we just really need to get you on here to talk with our audience about how you got to where you are. So let's go ahead and just kind of dig into that origin story a little bit. I know that you and Jeff West, who has been on this program
Mm-hmm.
before, know each other from way back in a way.
Yes.
And so that was not, though, your first entry into that industry, I guess. So what led you in? And for folks, I'm leaving stuff out here, Angelique, assuming they know what I know. You worked in insurance for a long time, and
I
so
did.
I don't know too many, let's say, 12-year-olds who say, I want to be an insurance salesperson when I grow up. So what led you into that to begin with?
Got it. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show. I'm really excited to just have this conversation with you. And yeah, I actually don't know very many 12-year-olds that also have that aspiration of like, I'm going to be an insurance agent. And for me, I had never sold anything in my life. And so when I made the decision to work in the insurance industry, that was not just a huge leap of faith, but just completely out of character. I don't know that I had the skill set to be a salesperson, but I did have the skill set to enjoy people. And that has always been, in most decisions that I make, the driving force. Is this something that can make a positive impact on someone's life? So whether that's, been in my personal life or in my professional life, that tends to be kind of my guardrail, or what leads me to it. So I was looking for a career and was actually approached by a young lady, and she said, you would be great working with this company. And I thought, I can't sell ice to an Eskimo. Like I can't do this. And she was like, I've been around you. And she goes, we'll go to a coffee shop and you'll just start talking to people standing in line and visiting with them. And I was like, well, that's easy. That's just talking to people. And she said, well, building relationships is really what sales is about, regardless of the industry. And so once I learned more about this company, and once I learned more about what I would actually be doing and the flexibility that it would give me, in terms of dropping my kids off at school, picking my kids up at school, and being able to be, at the Muffins with Mom and those types of events that I previously had not been able to do, it just seemed like an easy choice, but also it definitely was a leap of faith. But that was my driving
it was a
force.
commissioned salesperson position.
Absolutely.
I think, right?
I was 100% commission. I'm very grateful for a very supportive family. They might have all thought I was a little crazy in the beginning, but they were supportive, and you'll kind of see that theme play out that was my previous career, and as I transitioned into where I am now. But I was with a Fortune 200 company, insurance carrier, for 200 years, Fortune 200 for 18 years.
Not that it felt that way.
It did not feel that way. But I was with them for 18 years and actually ended up pretty much about 16, 17 of those years being in some type of leadership or management role. And, I think a lot of companies will take people who are good performers and promote them, kind of with that idea that those are transferable skill sets. And what I learned is that I didn't necessarily have those skill sets in terms of being a leader and in terms of being able to transfer that to the people that I led. And so I think John Maxwell is the one that says, if you're a leader and you find yourself with no one following, you're just taking a walk. And that was honestly me for the first 6 months in my, leadership role, my very first leadership role. And I really kind of had to go back to the basics. I had to do a lot of research and figure out what piece I was missing. And that's kind of what started me on the leadership journey was I'm doing something wrong and I need to figure it out and do something different. And what I discovered over the following, 16 years was I genuinely loved helping develop people. Like that kind of became my passion project. In fact, when people ask me, tell me about you, I'm like, if you want to know my core belief and my mantra, it's that people matter. And because people matter, leadership matters. And that is my driving force in terms of what I do. So that's how I got started in the industry.
Okay, got started in the insurance industry and then got started in leadership. There's so much I want to dig into here. I hope I can remember my questions here. One thing, just a real quick one, when you moved from on the street selling, so to speak, into leadership, still commissions? I mean, dependent complete. Okay, so one of the questions that I have here, I hear your orientation about, this is about relationships and this is about connecting with people. It's about people. It's about taking care of people. And when you're on 100% commission, I'm sure there are a lot of people who go into insurance sales thinking I can make a quick buck, and I work hard. I'll make lots of money. I had an insurance license years ago, and because of that, I knew that there was quite a high turnover rate in that first year or two. I'm assuming because, if I don't sell something, we're not going to pay the mortgage. That can get in the way of the relationship focus. So you've already said you had a supportive family, but once you moved into leadership, you're dealing with people who are facing that stress. How do you help other people who don't have maybe the cushion? If I don't sell something this week, I'm not going to eat, but I need to keep my focus on serving the client. How do you lead people with that?
I think a lot of it is just this attitude of getting hip to hip, shoulder to shoulder with them and helping them in the beginning. And so when I look at leadership, and I don't have, a diagram, but in my mind's eye, I think that there's like this leadership loop that you're constantly on. And part of that is, you're either leading from the front, and this is where you're maybe being a buffer for challenges. This is where you're casting vision, where you're, definitely like seeing what's going to happen 6 months down the road, right? And sometimes you're leading from behind, and this is where you're delegating and you're empowering. But the majority of the time, and especially what I found, is you're leading in the middle. And that is where you're training, you're mentoring, you're coaching, you're having those conversations that really matter to that person about let's be very real. And especially when you're talking about commission sales, it sounds almost intrusive, but you almost have to just be like, tell me what we need to make. And then almost reverse engineering, like what needs to happen. And then getting in the field and doing it with them and showing them how to do it. And I'm certainly not an expert on this, but I know that there are 4 different learning styles. And so some people are going to hear it. Some people need to see it. Some people need to get their hands on it, or some people need to read it. And just being able to kind of touch on all those different learning styles and make sure that people are really and truly grasping the concepts, I think that's part of it. I think the other part is just managing expectations and just being very real with people. And so it sounds like a horrible sales, but just being like, look, this is hard. Is it worth it? Absolutely. But this is hard. and just encouraging people to be smart with their money. You get that first big commission check, and then you want to be like, woohoo! And you can't do that in the beginning.
Yeah,
You've got
yeah.
to set it aside. So, but again, those honest conversations don't happen unless there's a relationship in place.
Okay, so it's a relationship between the leader and the salesperson. Does that make it easier then to get the idea across that, this is a relationship between you and the client, the customer? I mean, we know
Absolutely.
there's the stereotype of the salesperson as manipulator, and you and I both know that that is not effective.
That is not effective
But
at
there
all.
are a lot of people who come into it thinking that's the way to do it. And it doesn't help that there are those people who manage to make a lot of money that way.
Mm-hmm.
I would argue their quality of life is not good. It's not sustainable. It's not the way to build a long-term income for sure.
Mm-mm. Well, and I don't think they stay in the industry very long, to your point.
Mm,
Um,
yeah.
they will weed themselves out of the industry. But I definitely think, again, as a leader, when you think about that leading in the middle, you're modeling the behavior that you want your people to have and to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I'm modeling, like, look, you matter, and your finances matter to me, and I want to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to help you be successful. Now, at the end of the day, you've got to meet me halfway, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
this
Mm-hmm.
has to be a good fit for you. You're going to have to do the work. But if you're modeling that relationship, then when you're going and you're talking to your client or your prospective client, that's the same, really that same behavior that you want that salesperson or that agent to have with the client. Like, you matter to me. Your
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
business matters to me. Your employees matter to me. And so it just becomes really a way of life. It's not perfect. It doesn't always work the way you want it to, but that's the goal. That's the culture that, I know I really wanted to be able to have within my organization when I was with
Mm-hmm.
them.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. I got to wonder with the leadership training and consulting and that sort of thing that you do now, do you run into people who are at a leadership level? In other words, they
Mhm.
have survived, that initial turnover, who still think that somehow it's a battle or a contest between the salesperson and the client, and you have to help them see it differently, or almost inevitably when they make it to a leadership level, have they already figured out a lot of what you're talking about and you help them implement? Does that question make sense?
It does. And, I would say for the clients I have that are in the insurance industry, um, it's probably a combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
But I have clients that are not necessarily in the insurance industry as well, but they still haven't quite made that mental leap of the difference between management and leadership.
Ah,
And and again, if I had, a dry erase board, I would just show you, like, management is linear, right?
mm-hmm.
And so on one side, you've got the task, and then you've got the result.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we need managers. Like, we absolutely need managers. They get things done. But leadership, it's like you still start that same line, but then there's a whole lot of squiggles in the middle, and then it moves on. And the squiggles in the middle is because there's going to be a big mess that you kind of have to unpack, because leadership, on one side, it's people.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other side, it's growth. And maybe that's growth in the person. Maybe that's growth in the company bottom line. Maybe that's growth um, within a team, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there are differences between management and leadership. And there's a time and a place for both. But that's typically what I run into, is helping people who are either very focused on the results, understand that there's people involved, and people aren't going to just be able to be linear. They're very indirect. Um, Everyone's going to have a different journey
Mm-hmm.
because of again, learning styles, perspectives, bias, experience, skills, strengths, right?
Mhm.
And then it's like, how do I use that to help drive the results?
Okay. Now I have two questions at the same time, so it's competing to see which one's going to get out there first. One may be a pretty quick one here. I'm hearing a great explication of the difference between leadership and management. Is it the case that, for instance, if I were in some position that required it, excuse me, that at times I'm going to act as a manager, and at times I'm going to act as a leader? Or are we talking about the need for two different people here? Does that make sense?
It does. And again, I think it would just depend on the organization. You look at some smaller teams, and the leader, also the CEO, is also the CFO, is also the CMO, and is also the manager.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
And the janitor, and yes.
and the janitor, right?
Yes,
So
yes.
I just think it would depend on the organization.
Okay.
But at the end of the day, like, a leader is going to have to be held responsible to results. And so you've got to have a little bit of management in there. But I do think it's important that it's not leading my people through 100% management lens, because I think that that's when maybe you see a little bit higher turnover, or people aren't experiencing the growth, or they're not feeling in alignment, to steal your word, with the
Yeah.
organization.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And just the idea that it's not a matter of either or, and not that one is better than the other. So that's a great insight in and of itself right there. The related question that was competing to get out at the same time, at the college where I have taught for going on 34 years now, we had an HR, and I don't believe she was vice president level, but anyway, she was a very effective leader and manager. She wore both hats comfortably. And she did some training with the new student orientation leaders that I worked with. And I remember her saying, you may not be in a position where your position is labeled manager, but you are always a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that was pretty good insight. I wanted to put that out there for you to say, does that ring true with what your experience is? That whether
Absolutely.
if you're a frontline foot soldier, so to speak, you are a leader. How would that manifest if you're not yet in a position on the organization to be considered a leader?
Oh, that's such a great insight. And I fully agree with that. I think leadership is not a title. I think it's a role. And I think that regardless of your title, you can still play the role of a leader. And, you see that manifesting where people will come and speak to you, or ask for your input or your feedback, or, when there's a problem, they kind of look to you for a solution. And you'll start seeing that just with teams, where people naturally gravitate towards one person or several different people, but it doesn't really matter where they fall in the org chart. If they're influencing lives, which is what leadership is,
Mm-hmm.
then they are playing the part of a leader.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now let's take a little bit of a turn. I think people can pick up on the fact that you are now, rather than working for the insurance company, and we don't hesitate to say the insurance company, but that's just not the point right now.
Yeah.
You at some point left working within a corporate organization and went out on your own. Now, in a way, I would say, maybe I'm making an assumption, that's a little bit easier given your experience, because when you've been a commission salesperson, you were used to ebb and flow and having to account for expenses and all of that sort of thing. A little different than somebody going from a W-2 income into business. But still, there is a leap there because you no longer have this Fortune 200 company behind you. What led you to go out on your own at that point?
It was such a difficult decision. And I will tell you that I just felt like something wasn't right.
Hmm.
Not with the organization, not with the people I worked with, but within myself. And so it really came down to I was out of alignment. And again, that sounds weird when you're like, no, I loved the people, I loved the organization, but it was time for me to do something different.
Hmm.
And the beauty of it is that the organization that I worked for actually prepared me to do something different. It
Hmm.
was in my process of working in that leadership role that I found out how much I really enjoyed developing, specifically leaders. I enjoy developing people, but kind of my lane is specifically leadership.
Hmm.
And it was like this nagging voice that's in your gut. And you want to say, no, no, because I love it here. And this is comfortable and this is familiar. And I know this. And my friends are here. And there was so much that kind of pulled me to stay.
Hmm.
But that feeling of maybe there was something that I was supposed to be doing different would not go away, to the point where, the best way I can describe it is I felt just really out of alignment. So
Hmm.
that is when I made another leap of faith, and I have really described it as jumping out of the airplane without making sure that I had the parachute on.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Okay.
it's a little bit what it felt like, but again, just I have a supportive family, and to be honest with you, like the people that I left, from the previous career, they were so supportive, and that
Hmm.
was extremely helpful. I mean, they just were very happy for me and just felt like I would do well, and encouraging. And those are still friends that I have to this day, even though I'm not working with that organization anymore. So um, took another leap, which you guys are gonna be like, wow, she takes a lot of leaps. And you know, I really don't consider myself to be that, adventurous, but I guess I am. But I
Well,
took a
and
leap.
and let's dig into that just a little bit there. It's not that you just got up one day and said, I'm going to go out on my own. I mean, this was something that you considered for a while. Am I accurate on that?
Yes.
And you're listening to, for lack of a better term, listening to your gut. That is, you're bringing your life into alignment with your values. It's not that
Hmm.
there was something wrong, as you said. It's just that this is the next step that's
Yeah.
calling me. Um, it feels like leaping without the parachute. I would tend to say you leapt with a parachute, you just didn't have it strapped on yet. So you're strapping it on. But you were used to the kind of planning you have to do as a commissioned
Hmm.
salesperson. So
Absolutely.
chances are, did you do anything conscious like saying, I'm going to have 6 months of living expenses before I make this leap? Or did you just do it? Maybe you already had the 6 months because that's what you do as a commissioned salesperson. You plan for the dry spells.
Yeah.
Well,
Well, and again, part of the beauty of the insurance industry, and it is, I'm sure not all commission sales industries are this way, but part of the beauty of the insurance industry is that you typically have renewal income.
true. Yes.
And so that was just something that I was like, okay, I mean, if I fall flat on my face, I still have an insurance license and I have renewal income.
Mm-hmm.
And, but I didn't feel like I was going to fall flat on my face. And that sounds, that wasn't arrogant and that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't naivety. It was just, I knew that this is what I should be doing. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I found that through my time working with, this previous company. And it's interesting because if you look at what you do, like anybody in any role, you're going to have things that add energy to your life and you're going to have things that drain energy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so if I would sit there, and I even do this exercise with my clients, like I made a list of everything that I did all week long that was responsible with my job. And then I just started labeling, are these, energy adders or these energy drainers? And basically the things that I enjoyed that were really adding energy to my life, and I was finding joy in and accomplishment and just feeling maybe I was making an impact or a difference, they were all things that surrounded just being an internal coach or training or, developing people. And
Mm-hmm.
so I already knew that that was, kind of like my little Energizer Bunny battery. And so knowing that and knowing that I had a passion for it,
Mm-hmm.
and then also knowing that, yes, I've got some residual income that will be coming in, it was like, I've got a little bit of time to make this work. But I also didn't want to count on that,
Mm-hmm.
because I think sometimes if you count on that, it can make you a little bit complacent. So I really wanted to just hit the ground running. Um, I look for places where I can make an impact
Mm-hmm.
because, again, that's what drives me, you know, being
Mm-hmm.
able to help people. And this sounds maybe a little bit of a horrible business plan, but I look for places that I can make impact, and then I assume that the money will follow.
As our friend Bob Berg often talks about, if money comes like thunder following lightning, that is, it's an effect of focusing on adding value. And
Mhm.
that kind of sounds like what you were doing. And again, we're in a way we know each other at this point, in a way we're getting to know each other.
Sure.
My impression is that you came to that realization before you knew Bob Berg. Is that accurate? Okay, so this is
It
like
is accurate.
I think this is what they say. Great minds think alike. You had discovered this same important principle that he champions so
Yeah.
effectively. So yeah, if you were, and I'll draw a parallel here, Angelique. As I mentioned, I've spent actually over 40 years in higher education with students, and what I found was that students who obsessed and focused about the grades were always stressed and very often didn't do very well on the grades. If they focused on learning and they focused on mastering the material and the grades came almost as a fringe benefit, their stress was lower and they tended to make higher grades.
Yeah.
So this seems to me to be a parallel in business. If you focus on what matters to you, you focus on your values, you focus on taking care of the people that you serve.
Hmm.
I like the idea of talking about clients as opposed to customers, for philosophical reasons, but it keeps your
Yeah.
focus on the service. It doesn't guarantee the income, but then focusing on the dollars certainly doesn't guarantee it.
Yeah. It's a recipe for disaster in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
So good advice, I think, for anybody out there, whether you're in a W-2 income situation or you're out on your own, or especially for those of you listeners who might be considering something like this. So one of the things that and I'm going to hold this for just a second. I want to come back and ask your advice on somebody who's thinking about doing something similar, going out on their own. But I've had the crawl going on the video here for your website for a little while. We have a lot of folks who are audio only listeners, though, and we want to make sure that everybody has access to the resources. So the website we're talking about is aspirelubbock.com. Aspire like aspiring to bigger and better things.
mhm.
Aspire Lubbock, as in Lubbock, Texas.com. And I've got a QR code for those of you who are on with us visually. I started to say virtually, I guess in a way it is, since this is recorded. Okay, but you can take that screenshot there and go to Angelique's website. And then if you would rather type it in, we've got it down there at the bottom. We'll also have the website linked from the show notes. As always, remember you can get the show notes at confidencecultivators.com, which we've also had that crawl going for a while. And for those of you who are fortunate enough to be on here with us visually, I'm going to share the screen because I want you to see Angelique's website here. So let's pull that up. I happen to have it on the About screen there, but when you come in, you will see here at the top what all of this is about. I know you're used to people saying, well, what do you do? And, in a way, it takes a while to explain it. In a way, you can put it in one sentence. What would you say to people who ask, what is it that you do? What do you do for people?
I love working with businesses and specifically with leaders, whether they're new and emerging leaders or have been in a leadership role for a long time. And I help them either get clarity. I work an executive coach with them to identify their strengths and to help them improve as a leader and just be able to communicate with their employees, employee engagement. There's a lot. And then I also work in terms of like team dynamics. And so I am a certified Gallup strengths coach, and I love that tool. I'm a big Strength Finders fan, and I use that tool to help with, the common language between, employees and between teammates to really develop those team dynamics.
Mm-hmm. Ironically enough, I had forgotten that you did the Clifton Strengths thing, and I was going to ask you what your Clifton, the top five or whatever, so what is that top one or two or three, whatever you're comfortable with?
The top five, number one is connectedness, which people laugh. They're like, oh yeah, we hear it. Number two is developer. Number three is belief, which is why you hear me a lot of times say I believe a lot.
Yeah.
And then number four is responsibility. And then number five is restorative.
Okay. I'm learning about this. I have learned mine is learner, intellection, connectedness, ideation, and empathy. And for folks who don't know what we're talking about here, the Clifton Strengths, 34 different ones potentially. Am I right about that?
That's correct.
And so this is something that is supported by solid research. It's not like the Myers-Briggs type indicator that's kind of questionable. This can give you some real insights into your strengths and how you can work with other people.
Yeah.
So this is something that Angelique brings to bear there. So as
Don Clifton was, sorry, I was just going to say Don Clifton was credited with saying, what if we studied what was right with people instead of what was wrong with people? It's such a beautiful quote and such a beautiful idea.
Absolutely. In fact, there is a parallel kind of management theory, and I'm sure you're familiar with it. It's called, let me see, what's it called now? Appreciative inquiry. And the idea being organizations can get obsessive about where are we messing up. If you focus on what works well, there's an old saying in self-development, what you focus on, you get more of. And it just makes a great deal of sense. I didn't realize that Don Clifton came from that same place there. So appreciative inquiry, Clifton Strengths. Folks, I think you can see where Angelique's guidance can be really useful in whatever it is that you're going to be doing. So, Angelique, as we come down towards the end here, I always like to say to people, there's probably something that you wish that I had asked that I didn't think to ask. What would that be? And what would your answer to that be?
Oh my goodness.
Not trying to put you on the spot, but here's the opportunity. And I'm stealing something from our friend Yermi Kirkus. I think he puts it in a similar term. Yermi will ask people, and if you haven't heard his podcast, listeners, okay, I'm going to link to his podcast also in the show notes because it's just a great development kind of podcast as well. He will ask people, if you could stand up on the rooftop and shout a message, what would your message to the world be? And that may be helpful in coming up with what should I have asked you, Angelique, that I didn't think to ask.
Well, I think my message that I would probably shout is that if you get it right with your people within your organization will thrive. And it's so important to invest in your people because they are actually the only not the only, but probably the most important asset that you'll have that can appreciate. But if you don't invest in your people, they can also depreciate. So they can either be your biggest asset or they can be your greatest liability. And it's just really important to invest in your people and in that, human capital that you've got.
Okay. Okay. Let me dig just a little bit there. Investing means spending money on your people, but there's also other kinds of investments that you're talking about, I think, right?
Mhm.
What would be other investments that you make in your people?
Investments in terms of their professional growth, or even
Yeah.
having conversations with them, from a leader to a team member or a direct report, where you're asking them, like, what do you want from your time with us? What do you feel like you can bring? And so then it's not just this, like, this is what we need you to do and this is what we feel like we can get from you, but kind of flipping the script a little bit and saying, what can we do for you to help you develop? And not everybody wants to stay 20, 30, 40 years with a company anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But the experience that they can have with that company when they leave, now they've become a brand ambassador for you.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I'm a brand ambassador for the company that I left,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I had such a positive experience.
Exactly.
And I think you'll see a higher return, maybe not be able to track it down to the dollar, but you'll see a higher return on employee engagement and just having employees that are willing to be creative, to think outside the box, to bring their very best to work,
Mm-hmm.
when they know that you genuinely care about what they are looking for and what they want.
Hmm. Sounds like to me this might be one of those differentiators between leadership and management,
Mm-hmm.
because leadership requires vision, and you have to be able to see that beyond what the expense might be just this week or this quarter.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, very good. Well, Angelique, it has been a pleasure having you for this conversation. I know the insights you have shared are going to help our audience members. So I want to thank you for being here. And since we are recording this, I'll be able to thank you properly real soon. So we won't have to send you to the green room. But at this point, I will turn it back to my live self and say, Don, take it away.
Thank you.
I'm just so happy to have had this conversation with Angelique. Great insights, great enthusiasm, great inspiration for anybody who is thinking about what their next step might be. As we're always talking about on this show, living your values to value your life. So many people just stay in a job. It's not a bad job, but if you're aware that you've got a next step, and out of habit or fear or whatever, you don't take it. Angelique said she takes a lot of leaps. She didn't particularly view herself that way, and yet she does. And that's an inspiration to us all. I appreciate the time that you have spent with us this week. Just a little reminder for folks who are listening. I do have to put this out there. We value the audio only audience. Probably one of the biggest components of the alignment show. But this was one of those shows where we've had lots of comments from audience members. And since it was recorded, the main interview was recorded, I couldn't call them out. We were showing them on the screen. So if you will go to confidencecultivators.com, you will be able to see the show notes and be able to see what the rest of us were seeing. I don't want you to feel left out, but at the same time, I want you to know that resource is available. ConfidenceCultivators.com. Not only will you find the show notes, but you'll find links to video replays. So if you want to see that component, that would be a great thing to do. As we look towards next week, a week from today, April the 12th will be the broadcast date, and we have another member of the Go Giver Success Alliance who will be on here. This is, by the way, not an official outlet of that. It's just that I meet so many great people through that. And so Brenda Yoho is going to be on with us next week. Brenda has decades of experience in education, and she now mentors other people, teachers and principals in particular, who face some unique challenges in today's education environment, I guess we would say. She's written a book, and we'll be talking about her book next week as well. So we're looking forward to that. But in any case, it's time for us to wrap things up this week on the Alignment Show. Remember to live your values so that you can value your life. And we'll see you next week. That's it for this week's episode of the Alignment Show. What has it inspired you to do in your own life? Whatever it is, take action now and take the first step. It will help you to talk with a friend about what you're thinking. Share confidencecultivators.com to spread the goodness. And remember to live your values and value your life. We will see you next week on The Alignment Show.